Without question, a keto diet will drastically lower your glucose levels and usually do away with most, if not all, of your diabetic complications. But is it just a crutch, or is it a cure? We're going to take a look at that today. One of the most common objections I hear concerning a low-carb or keto diet for diabetes is that it's merely a crutch, a Band-Aid that doesn't really cure anything and is hardly worth bragging about. One individual commented under one of my videos with these words, "This is great how well the keto thing works for diabetes, but it is a crutch." And another person complained, "When we can't eat everything, it means we're still diabetic. Controlling testing numbers is not a cure. I think there's no cure for diabetes. It can only be controlled either by drugs or diet." So today I want to consider this sentiment. I'll let you know at the beginning that I don't agree with it. And for the next few minutes, I'll tell you why. The word crutch usually has a negative connotation. If you cannot get through the day, for example, without taking powerful tranquilizers, some people might say these pills are a crutch for you, meaning they're an artificial means of trying to fix something that you ought to be able to fix without them. You haven't really solved your core problems, you're just using your medication as a crutch. And quite a few people feel this way about the keto or a low-carb diet as a remedy for diabetes. Not all, but no doubt many will attach scorn and even a sense of mocking to a low-carb diet to treat diabetes. What they're really saying is, "You hopeless loser, you cannot beat diabetes through a true and genuine remedy, so you turn to that nasty, unnatural keto diet instead. If you were a real man or a real woman, you'd do it the way I do, keto schmedo." And sadly, some people who are seeing tremendous victory through diabetes through their keto diets have no answer for these mockers, and they hang their heads and walk away with their proverbial tails between their legs, saying, "I guess he's right. I guess I'm nothing but a hopeless loser. I beat diabetes the wrong way." But don't you believe that for a second. Moving to a keto or low-carb diet after being diagnosed with diabetes is not a crutch. It is an answer, it is a cure, and it is an intelligent response to the scourge of diabetes. And here's why. Let's suppose that you live in a remote village in some poverty-stricken country where there's no clean drinking water available. The only water you can get comes from the river, where just upstream from your village there is raw sewage constantly pouring into it. But nobody in the village has ever realized that the continual cases of typhoid and many of the deaths in the village have an exact correlation with the contaminated drinking water. Why are people constantly sick? Why do people die young, long before they should? Why are there so many cases of diarrhea and terrible stomach pain, headaches, and fevers? Nobody has ever put two and two together and realized that the very water that they're drinking every day is behind most of the miseries in their little village. Then one day someone comes along who knows about typhoid and starts preaching to the village that the water that they're drinking is the problem. Out of his compassion, he pays for pure, clean, bottled water to be brought in regularly so that this terrible scourge of typhoid will come to an end. But, sadly, most of the villagers do not believe him. They think he's some kind of a con man, and they refuse that bottled water. But not all. Some are convinced he's telling the truth, and they stop drinking from the river and start drinking the pure water, and lo and behold, they stop getting typhoid. Their health improves tremendously. No more fevers, no more diarrhea, no more stomach pains. "I'm cured," they announce triumphantly. "Look at me, I don't get sick anymore. I feel better than I have in years." But those who refuse the bottled water are not about to admit that this water does anything. They tell the bottled water drinkers, "You're not cured. That bottled water that you drink is just a crutch. It's a crutch, I tell you. Until you can drink our good old dirty, stinky, filthy river water and stay healthy, you're not cured at all. Look at you with all your bottles of water, your little crutches. You're just a hopeless loser with a capital L. Well, I think you get the idea, but in case you don't, here's what I'm talking about. I've traveled internationally a lot, and I've traveled a lot in the U.S. as well. I've preached in many conferences throughout many of the states of America and in several African nations, throughout much of India, in the Philippines, and in Mexico. And wherever I've gone, I have found that people are typically living on a diet of unhealthy and way too many carbs. Our world is suffering from an epidemic of carbohydrate overload. We're being contaminated with carbs, particularly those coming from sugar and from grains. We're eating in an unhealthy and unnatural manner. Like the villagers of the illustration, we're globally contaminating ourselves day by day and meal by meal. Men and women were never meant to live on carbohydrates the way that we do today. With all of our chips and pastries and sweets and pasta and rice, we're damaging our bodies incrementally with each passing year. Now, God has created us with strong and resilient bodies, and we can endure a lot of abuse before our bodies finally give out and fall apart. But they will not last forever, even under the best of circumstances. How much quicker will they deteriorate as we poison ourselves one bag of chips at a time, one donut at a time, one sandwich at a time? Now, getting back to our village, let me ask you, would it really be a crutch for the villagers to stop drinking their filthy river water and start to drink pure water from bottles? Of course that would not be a crutch. It's simply an intelligent response to a desperate situation. To refuse the pure water and go right on drinking the contaminated water, thinking that if you drink it long enough, suddenly all your problems are going to go away, well, that would just be absurdity. In fact, it would be the definition of insanity, to go right on doing what you've always done, that is, eating a high-carb, high-sugar, high-grain, high-starch diet, and expecting different results. Some people are going to brag and say, well, I still eat a high-carb diet, and my A1C is in the 5, so I'm not doing so bad. I don't need your crutch. Well, let me tell you something, my friend. Your glucose levels are the last domino to fall. I had metabolic issues, frozen shoulders, infections, irritable bowel syndrome, and serious arthritis long before my glucose ever started to rise. When your glucose levels begin to go up, you're at the end. And in many cases, you've done all kinds of damage to your body and suffered all sorts of symptoms simply by virtue of your poor body requiring more and more insulin in a desperate attempt to keep up with your ever-increasing insulin resistance. Here's another illustration for you. Suppose you get a headache every morning, but you have found that by taking a single aspirin, you can drive that headache away. But after a couple of years, you find it takes 2 aspirin to drive your headache away, and then 4, and then 6. And after 20 years, you're taking 20 aspirin every day, 10 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon, to keep from getting headaches. And these 20 aspirin do the job, but they're doing what used to take only 1 to do. And after another 5 years, no amount of aspirin can do the job at all. You go through every day with severe migraine headaches, regardless of how many aspirin you take. Well, that is precisely what's happening with your insulin and your glucose levels. As you continually stuff yourself with carbohydrates, with sweets and starches and grains and mountains of white flour products, it's going to take more and more insulin to keep your glucose levels in the proper range. And your body will gamely make every effort to do this. This is why you may be at a decent A1C, and yet if you knew what's really going on, you'd realize your worn-out pancreas is producing 10 times as much insulin as it did when you were in your 20s. You're going through every single day with super high insulin levels, a condition called hyperinsulinemia. And there are 2 problems with this. First, this sky-high insulin itself is highly toxic and can damage your health in multiple ways, even when your glucose is in a normal range. And second, this condition is unsustainable. Your metabolic system will crash eventually, and you'll become a raging diabetic, and the next thing you know, you'll be constantly injecting insulin, and still your diabetes will only get worse. So again, let me ask you, is it a crutch to stop this vicious merry-go-round and start eating naturally? No, it is not. When you stop stuffing yourself with donuts and bread and sugar and chips and pasta and rice and sweet tarts and moon pies and sugar-frosted flake cereal, you're not using a crutch. You're simply making an intelligent response to a life-threatening situation. You're now eating the way you should have been eating all along. So why is it important for us to see this? It's important because if we assume that our low-carb approach to diabetes is a crutch, we'll always be looking back over our shoulders, wishing we could go back to the land of the standard American diet, or the standard British diet, or the standard African diet, or the standard Chinese diet. It hardly matters what nation you pick. Almost all of our world is overdosing on carbohydrates. Or to put it another way, we are drinking the contaminated water when we should be going for the bottled water. So the next time some mocker accuses you of using a low-carb crutch, don't hang your head, don't shuffle away in humiliation feeling like a loser. Tell them the story of the little village where everyone had typhoid. I want to remind you about my other YouTube channel, which goes simply by my name, Dennis Pollock. On this channel, I am uploading one video per week, and I call these videos Video Devos, or Video Devotionals. In these brief 6 or 7 minute talks, I discuss key Bible topics on all kinds of subjects, such as who will go to heaven, what about those who never hear the gospel, God's definition of a virtuous woman, predestination, was Jesus a conservative, will God give me whatever I ask, the nature of hell, is it safe to go with your gut, did Jesus and Paul preach 2 different gospels, and a whole lot more. I also use historical events and biographies to illustrate biblical truths, including Devos featuring Muhammad Ali, Bonnie and Clyde, the sinking of the Titanic, Mickey Mantle, Ulysses S. Grant, Heinrich Himmler, and others. So check out my Video Devo channel, which goes by my name, Dennis Pollock. You may just find that the 7 minutes per week you spend watching these devotionals will turn out to be a solid investment of your time. And as a bonus, you'll see Benedicta there from time to time. A link to these videos is in the description.